I'm AJ Ayers, co-founder here at BKFi, and I am joined by Ed today, who's one of our financial planners. We are both highly credentialed. We've got CFPs, CPAs, whatever. We know what we're talking about, right? But today we're here to talk about something that is near and dear to our hearts as homeowners, and also near and dear to a lot of our clients' hearts, whether they're buying homes for the first time, buying a vacation home, getting back into the market, helping out family members. But I was just thinking, Ed, I just bought the house that I'm living in right now in December, and I just going through the process as a first-time home buyer, or even just coming back in after a couple of years, you forget all the nitty-gritty stuff that happens. So that's why we want to do this webinar, to just talk about the stuff that they don't tell you. There's tons of articles on how much house you can afford, mortgage rates, yada yada yada, housing prices, all that. Like we'll touch on that a little bit, but let's talk about like, how do I get money out of the bank into my house? Like, how does that work? Let's talk about that. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and let's dive right in. Oh, hi friends. I see lots of friends joining us. I love that for us. Let me make sure I can see all of you. So yeah, I'll be presenting. And when I don't know the answer, Ed, I'll ask you, and Ed will be monitoring the chat. So this is an AMA, it's a Q&A. So we've got slides, but please do jump in with questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we will answer them live if we can. All right, fantastic. Just before we get started, yada, 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 mute your phone. I don't really care. We can't hear you anyway. Drop your questions in the chat. And we are recording. So if you miss something, don't worry about that. And of course, let us know what topics you'd love to see in the future. I like doing these webinars. A lot of people watch them afterwards on YouTube, so that's cool. So let us know what you want to hear. We're happy to discuss it. So just to kind of like level set a little bit, for those of you who are BKFi clients, you may have gotten a little bit of a tone that we are anti-home ownership. I don't think that's fair to say, right, Ed?
Yeah, absolutely not.
Like, we want you to buy the home of your dreams. We want you to do that. But we also want what's best for you as fiduciaries. And so often we're kind of having a negotiation with our clients of like, yes, we know you want to buy the brownstone in Brooklyn that costs $3.5 million and needs $1.5 million of work. Like, yes, but is that the best financial move based on these other goals that you've told us, that you want to travel, you want to retire early? Like, we can't have everything. So when we come to this webinar, which is going to be a little bit negative about home ownership, I just want to be clear that we want you to buy that home. And we are going to help you get there, help you save for that, help you get the right mortgage, help you connect with the right people. But we don't want you to go over budget. We don't want you to be stressed out. We don't want to create an anxiety problem that didn't exist before, right? Paying rent, if you can't make rent, you move somewhere cheaper, right? If you can't pay your mortgage, the bank will come and repossess your home. So we don't want to create that culture of anxiety. So listen to your financial planner when they give you a budget for your home purchase. I'm going to repeat that one more time for the people in the back. Listen to your financial planner when they give you a budget, and do not go over budget. I know the house is beautiful. I know it was built in 1962 and has mid-century modern accents. I know. But if it's $200,000 over your budget, you can't afford it. And if it needs $200,000 of work and it's at budget, you can't afford it. That's just the reality. It's a nasty reality, right? You can read a million articles about how it's harder than ever to buy a house. So that's just the world that we're living in. But we're going to talk about how to navigate it. I hate being right. I really do. And I think these are actual quotes from clients that we crowdsourced today from our advisors. So I hate being right, but I have talked many folks out of buying homes upstate. Again, if you can afford the house and it's a good move, we will help you get there, but it's not the right move for everyone. And a lot of housing regret, right? Do you have regret about buying your house?
Some days I do. Some days when the repairs come and I see that I know I'm gonna have to replace HVAC systems that are getting a little old, and the roof is getting a little old, I'm just, yeah, sometimes I wish that I could just call somebody like a landlord and be like, hey, something's broken, come fix it. It's pretty sweet. But that person is me.
Yep. Me and my bank account and I. I lived we rented for years in Brooklyn. We were in this beautiful third floor walk up in Clinton Hill, and it was expensive and I didn't like paying that rent, but when something broke, there was a little portal and I typed my little message and a repair person would show up within 2 hours. That was the promise, and that was pretty sweet. And now when something breaks, I gotta find the plumber. It's a mess. Anyway.
Yeah.
Shout out to our sponsor of today's presentation, the BrooklynFi.com mortgage calculator. Yeah, if you are thinking about buying a home, brooklynfi.com/mortgage. We built this, which is a really helpful look at how much things actually cost, what interest rates are we looking at, what you can expect to pay in property taxes and whatnot. So if you have a chance, check that out.
I've actually been doing this for myself when I've been looking to move to the suburbs. Or
Yeah.
just looking at, as you're perusing Zillow, as you typically do on a late night, have this handy on the other tab.
Yep, exactly. I love it too. So things that I wish I'd known about buying a house. This is a weird one, but having a brick and mortar bank you can walk into, and having wires set up, that's like a big one. At Brooklyn FI, we love high yield savings accounts. We like Ally Bank, we like American Express. Like, park your money in these online banks to get interest. Once you're in the home purchase process, you need that big old bank. You need that Chase, that Bank of America, that Citibank, because there's a lot of money moving around and you need to be able to get your cash fast and you need to be able to get a lot of it fast. So I found it very helpful and kind of life-saving to be able to walk into my neighborhood bank and say, I need to, get this cashier's check or wire this amount overnight. Would you agree?
I 100% agree. This is actually a really important point because I recently had a friend who just purchased their first home, and the real estate agent sent them wiring instructions via email, not connected to a bank. That real estate agent's email was actually hacked. So had they wired the money and not went to a bank and actually had this done, they would have wired it to an incorrect account. And the down payment for the home would have been gone. So having access to a physical location where you know where the money is, that there's a trusted person that you can talk to about it, super important. Fortunately, they were able to see that this was they didn't make that mistake, and now they have a house. They were able to make the right down payment, but probably wouldn't have happened if they had a brick and mortar person to go to and discuss this with.
Yeah, these are big numbers moving around, and when you if you're going through this process for the first time, you're going to be frustrated with the bank, you're going to be frustrated with your lender. Like, there's a lot of moving parts here. There's a lot of protections in place for a good reason, right? There's a lot of fraud, there's a lot of identity theft, so it is going to be annoying. I want to prepare you that it's going to be annoying to try to move $200,000 from one bank account to an escrow account.
Yeah.
And just kind of like backing up a step, like what happens when you put your down, usually you put a deposit down, and that goes into an escrow account held by the escrow company. So basically, whoever the lender or the agents are working with, ours was like New York Escrow Company, blah, blah. And you literally, this company exists to hold your money as a neutral third party while the details of the contract are being worked out. So don't get scared if you're wiring money to, Joe's escrow shop on wherever you are. Anyway, next bullet point, what's important? If there's a competitive market and you know that there are a lot of other buyers and you're only competing on price, don't nitpick on little things. You can read these articles that'll say, oh, you want to make sure it's freshly painted and the sink handle in the second bathroom doesn't work. You need the seller to fix that before you move in. Those are all great tips. If you're in a competitive market, don't haggle over little things that are going to make you lose the house. True story. We sold a previous apartment to get this apartment. And there was a buyer who kept annoyingly being like, hey, this little thing and this little thing. And they were $500 to $1,000 things. And then a cash buyer came in and said, I'm good. And we took the cash offer. So just know that that's how we just kind of want to avoid those unnecessary delays in a competitive market. If it's not competitive, nitpick all day long.
Also sounds like it's nice to have cash.
Of course, it's nice to have cash. It's nice to have cash. I'm sure people have questions about interest rates and all that. Cash is nice, but it's not a requirement. Cash is absolutely not a requirement. It can help you in an extremely competitive market, but at the end of the day, this other buyer was totally fine. If they had not nitpicked about this one thing, we would have closed 2 weeks before. This other person showed up and we were motivated to sell. So cash offers are often lower. Sometimes you can get a deal, but not always. Yeah, great point. An accepted offer does not mean shit in this business. That basically means the seller said, okay, that sounds good. Let's move forward to this very light agreement that we both promise that we're, going to do this transaction together. But really, until money moves and contracts are signed, your offer doesn't mean shit. And we've unfortunately had a lot of clients get swiped after they've had an accepted offer. I've been swiped on accepted offers. Just know that that's not a legally binding term, that your offer has been accepted.
Yeah, we've had clients definitely swipe the house from one of them, an offer accepted, and then the seller realized that the price that they put up wasn't high enough. They expected to create a bidding war, didn't really happen. Everyone lowballed them because they set a lowball price. And so then they just pulled the house from the market, even though they accepted client's offer.
Yeah.
So
And that's like, another thing about buying a home is like, where are you buying a house? Most of our clients are buying in New York City, which is a whole wacky market and has all these wacky rules. If you're buying someone's vacation home, it's probably a less competitive market. You do probably have more room. You can probably negotiate a little bit more. If a apartment between $1 million and $2 million comes up on the market in Brooklyn, like we're off to the race.
yeah.
This next one, have your cash marinating. This is a weird one that I didn't actually experience until I helped one of our very early clients buy a home. Lenders are very conservative. Banks are very conservative. They want to know that you're a good borrower, and they want to know that you actually have the money and that you didn't just get a gift from someone or move money around to make it look like you have the money. So banks typically like to see the money in an account in your name. I've heard various things. What are we saying? Like 6 months?
Yeah.
Ish. Yeah. So if you're getting cash from somewhere else, whether it's your own investments or a gift from a family member or liquidating something, it's good to just have that cash ready to go when you're ready. We don't want to do that too soon. We don't want to liquidate investment accounts, but just know that that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, and in that vein, you'd park that in a high yield savings account. Right now, the interest rates are high, so your cash is marinating, but it's also earning you a little bit, so you're not losing out too much, knowing that you're going to use it pretty soon. So
exactly. And look, I think real estate agents, we're gonna talk a little bit about more like their role later. But agents can be very helpful to you. We're in this weird time where, oh, I found the home on Zillow, my agent didn't do anything. Your agent's gonna be really helpful with making the offer, communicating with the seller's agent, all that jazz. I know that in this era of Zillow and Redfin, real estate agents often can be brought in a little bit later, or you might just get like paired with a Zillow agent. But just know that finding someone you like and trust. If you're a client and you need a recommendation, we've got a bunch that we like as well. And then finally, in New York specifically, you need a good real estate attorney. They are going to be very important once things get going, once we start talking about closing and closing costs and all this other crap that you need to do in New York City. It's just it's just more expensive to buy property here for good reason, because it's the best city in the world. Anything else to add, Ed?
I don't know. That's not comment at the end there.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fair. Everyone's entitled to their own
Ed's
opinion.
in Philadelphia, by the way.
No, I think a real estate attorney is definitely important. I mean, especially depending on how the ownership is going to be structured. If you're buying it with a spouse, if you're buying it with a non-spouse, if there's a lot of considerations, and even in estate planning to consider when buying a home. This is a large investment, an illiquid large investment, that you want to make sure that everything is set up properly in terms of ownership, and you have an idea, and anything having to do with title and any other issues in the purchase process. Agreed.
100%. The shit they won't tell you in an inspection. Inspections are great. You absolutely need one. Do not forego an inspection. I don't care how badly you want the house. Do not do that. People did that during the pandemic. There's 100 Wall Street Journal articles about why you shouldn't do that. Just please don't do that. But there are things that you don't necessarily know and you're not going to glean from an inspection. For example, the windows are so thin that the bedroom gets so cold that you can't sleep in it, even with the heat. There's no way you would have known that if you bought the house in August. Now it's the winter time and you have to replace the windows with double coated glass, which costs anywhere between $10,000 and $20,000, depending on how big your windows are. So just know that there are going to be and this is what we mean about kind of like that buyer's regret, is like you're making this huge purchase, but like talk to the neighbors, like try to figure out like how is the neighborhood? Are you on an ambulance route, which I was in my previous apartment? You know, there's no screens on the windows because the previous owner took them out. Well, now you got to replace all the screens. So just know that there are going to be things that come up that aren't, an inspector is not there to tell you how comfortable your home is. An inspector is to know, is it up to code? Does the electrical system work? You know, does the washing machine do what it says it's going to do?
Yeah.
Anything else, any horror stories to share, Ed?
I mean, talking about windows, the house that I bought and I currently live in is next to an electric power plant. And when we were buying it, there was a gentle hum, but it was like a white noise, you know, that you could sort of fall asleep to. But at some point in time, during random nights and days, they actually have to do some kind of expelling, which is a very loud noise. And our windows were not, talking about thin windows, the windows were not noise canceling by any way, and by any means. And so that's something we had to deal with. We found out basically about 2 months after we moved in. We had a good question come in actually about how much do you budget for repairs?
Ooh, great question. I'm gonna get to that. I got a whole slide on it. So we're gonna talk about exactly how much you need to budget for that. Oh, here's a slide of some closing costs of a random home in New York City. And we're not gonna go through all of these line by line, but just know that there are a ton of little extra things that happen when you actually close. Generally, we say between 3 and 6% of the total value of the house is what you want to have on hand for closing costs. So it's variable just depending on how much your house costs. There's all these weird things in New York City, like if you're buying a home in New York City that's more than $1 million, we have something called the mansion tax, which is 1% of the total purchase price, no matter what. So if you're buying a home that costs $1,001, please try to negotiate that down to $999,000 and give the seller a couple grand because it's going to save you a bunch of money. That actually happened. That was a true story. So yeah, just be aware that there are these little random costs. I think one thing that doesn't get mentioned is that you have to have homeowners insurance in place before you buy a house, because think about it, makes sense. The deed transfers at this moment when you close, and you know, weird shit happens. There could be a lightning storm and the house could burn down. Like, you need to have home insurance in place. So if you don't have an agent yet, or just you can get a home policy online, you can shop around, but you will need to have that in place. So I always recommend, like, while you're putting in offers, like, get on the phone with an agent, get that quote set up so you can just give them your credit card to get it set up when you do close. Because that can take a few days. That's one of those things that could delay this process, not having that homeowner's policy in place.
Yeah.
I asked ChatGPT, which is my new favorite toy, to display what the hidden costs of home ownership are, and here's what we came up with. So yes, the home is beautiful, but there's a lot of expensive, you know, grime in the basement that we didn't know about.
Yeah, with dollar signs, which I love.
Yeah, I love ChatGPT's creative spelling. I'm a better speller than ChatGPT, and that's saying something. So what are some of the hidden costs that we don't see mentioned in, you know, I'm ready to buy a house articles? One-time fees. You'll need an attorney, at least a few $1,000s in New York City. That attorney thing is specific to New York City. Did you have one of those in Philly as well?
We didn't need an attorney for the home that we were purchasing, but it probably would have been good to have one at the time because my wife and I were not married at the time, so we bought the house jointly. So it probably would have been good to consult an attorney, had the relationship not worked out. But fortunately, you know, owning a property together is more of a commitment than marriage, and so the marriage thing was so much easier after that.
Perfect. Yeah, just having someone look at the paperwork, like, you know, they always send it to you, like they send a DocuSign for you to review. Like, we all know we're not reading the DocuSign, we're just clicking through and signing. So it's good to have, that is a good amount of money, $3,000 to $5,000 to pay for a purchase that's likely going to be 6 or 7 figures. One-time cost is the inspection. Usually your real estate agent can recommend someone. Those typically, I think mine for this house was like $1,000 for like the basic package. You can get fancier. You need one, definitely get one. And then sometimes I put this on here, like when the inspection happens, then you learn about things that you're going to need to fix. So, hey, the washing machine works, but it kind of leaks, so you're going to want to replace that. So an inspection to me is also an inventory of the costs that you're going to need. They're going to be your move-in costs, and we'll talk about those later as well.
And I would ask the person, the inspector there, just to really go like climb in every crevice, make sure they find everything, because that's the stuff that has to get reported, right? So that makes it easier then to negotiate a price if they found something else. So I remember our inspector climbing through the one like small panel that we have there, where a previous owner set up a second bathroom, which wasn't really a bathroom. So it was
Perfect.
we worked all that out prior to the purchase. So that was really helpful. But it
Yeah,
does
and it's kind of like you get what you pay for with an inspection too. You can find inspectors who will do it for $400 and they'll say, yep, no fire hazards here, we're good to go, but they didn't check in all the crevices and nooks and crannies.
Yeah.
Changing locks, recommend that for sure. That could be expensive if you've got old fancy doors. Replacing appliances, you might find that you want or need to replace the fridge, gas range, dishwasher, all that jazz. Hidden renovations, again, that's kind of the like, oh, well, we didn't know that the windows needed to be replaced, those things that you didn't want to do, but you have to do to make it a livable home. And often these things get discovered once you're living in it. And of course, buying all new furniture, because no one ever moves into a home and doesn't buy anything. It's a different space, you're gonna want different decor.
Yeah.
Anything else one time that I missed?
I mean, a lot of things is actually when you do, usually when you walk into a house, it's all nice and set for you, right? Whether it's the previous owner's furniture. And then once you actually buy the house, you find a lot of things on the floor. I feel like things you don't notice. Where the furniture stood, there's usually dents or marks in it. You find carpeting in places that you didn't think there was carpeting, or something that was a rug wasn't actually a rug, it's now glued. So there's some of these one-time fees that really come in terms of the actual home. And then you also sometimes realize that you walk into a place, it seems smaller or bigger depending on, when you walk into it when it's completely empty.
For sure.
We've had issues with flooring. Like there were some things that we walked in and we didn't realize it, that there was some furniture that was standing, there was a hole in the floor where we could see the downstairs from our upstairs. So it was like, well, that's not great.
Oh my God. Yeah, and I think that's, the idea that you move into a place, like you're gonna change stuff. Like and we'll talk about that budget later.
I think the other important thing is moving expenses. That's a one-time fee if you're thinking about, so now you're moving into a home out of an apartment.
Yep.
Thank you, Dan, by the way. Appreciate that.
Oh yeah. Yes.
It's absolutely a one-time cost that, I mean, hopefully sometimes if you're working for a company that's nice enough to give you a relocation budget, if that's the case. But in most cases, you have to hire the U-Haul truck, the time and money spent of actually moving all of your items out. That's a substantial cost.
And pro tax tip, if you are moving to a lower tax state, you actually need the moving truck expenses to ensure that you actually broke up with the state you're moving out of.
Yeah.
You can get, if you're moving out of, let's say, New York to Florida, and you want to break your residency, we actually have to show physical records of you actually moving all your stuff there. So that's another good reason to hire movers. Ongoing costs, maintenance. We all know, gas, electric, common fees, common charges, or HOA dues if you're in a condo or a co-op, or even some neighborhoods will have, neighborhood association dues of some kind for trash or security or what have you. Utilities, you pay those anyway when you're a renter. Bigger house, higher utilities. So I think that's something that I've seen clients run into is like, oh yeah, when you have a 2-bedroom apartment that you're renting and then you move into a house, oh, my electric bill was $200 before, and now it's $800 because we're trying to heat a giant 5-bedroom house in the country. So,
and mentioning those thin windows, it probably costs a lot more.
Exactly.
To heat a house like that.
Apparently, I change my fridge every year. I think I just didn't move that over. Home insurance premiums. Ooh, this is in the news recently. Home insurance premiums are going up and up and up. We have the climate change affecting our coasts and our interior. It's more expensive to insure houses, so premiums are going up. Mine went up to $3,500 last year, and was a huge increase from what we were paying before. So that's not, to me, that always used to be like a throwaway, like, oh, you just get homeowners insurance. Now this is a significant cost, and I don't see it coming down anytime soon.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is they cover like replacement cost, which is sometimes not even the entire cost to replace. If something does happen, like you're paying this expensive price, and it may not even actually be enough in a lot of cases to cover what you need to do to get back into your home.
Exactly. And just things you don't think about, like, oh, cool, this place has a new electric fireplace. Well, that costs money to run that. So just, things that you're not thinking about that might be increased costs as you're budgeting. And then finally, gardening and landscaping. This is a huge expense if you're having a house with a yard. That stuff costs money. Sometimes if you're in a nicer area, you're required to do that. So even if you don't want to, you still have to pay for it. And it can be a couple $100s a month, but often I would say $1,000 and up if you've got a lot of lawn to take care of.
Yeah.
Cool. Hidden costs of homeownership for condos and co-ops. So, when you're browsing the Zillow listings and you see there's the, monthly maintenance, it's $850 for a 2-bedroom condo in Brooklyn. Seems fine. I factored that into my cost, no problem. Those fees do go up. Sometimes they'll go up a little bit, sometimes they'll go up a lot. But something that can happen is what's called an assessment, which is an unexpected shared cost to the homeowners association. And this can be anything from a tree fell on someone's car and it wasn't covered. We need to do additional landscaping, we're painting, the heating, like any updates that affect the whole building, that cost gets shared among homeowners. Now, hopefully you have a financially stable homeowners association or co-op board. But if you don't, then that's going to come to you. And we already have one coming up in our co-op or our condo building, and we've only been here for like 4 months. It's not a big one, but it's just like, oops, we didn't account for this cost. That's coming. So just know that a mortgage is not necessarily a fixed cost. These things do come up. And yeah, if you have a chance, make sure you review the finances of the HOA, because they're reviewing your finances to see if you're a good fit. Let's make sure that they're solvent and they have some cash in the bank to pay as well.
Yeah. In a similar thing to the condo associations,
Yeah.
if you're in a development, a lot of those things pop up as well. We recently had my in-laws recently had to change a certain lamp that was on their front facade because the whole development, the HOA board, the development board decided that every house needed to now match with it. So, and they also started getting letters saying that the lamps that they had were no longer in line with what everyone had. So now there's a cost to it. Like and it's just a decoration. It has literally no purpose, no other purpose.
Right. But everything has to look the same because someone decided. Oh, we forgot to mention our co-op and condo boards and board meetings. So this is a fun thing that they don't tell you about, is that when you move into a condo or co-op as an owner, you become instantly, how do I say this? Not friends, but you are now associated with the other homeowners. And these meetings typically happen, depending on your development, they can happen monthly, they can happen quarterly, they can happen annually. And they are often drama filled. I don't watch reality television because I go to my condo board meetings. You can run for, if you want to change and you have a lot of free time on your hands and like dealing with people, you can run for board seats to have power to change things. Do not recommend that. But anyway, just that's something that comes up that we didn't know about before.
Is this a potential presidential run, just starting out in the co-op?
No, absolutely not. I'm absolutely. And it's a volunteer position that's not paid, and it's kind of a thankless job. So anyway, property taxes. We can do a whole webinar on property taxes. They're different everywhere. They may be included in your mortgage payment. They may not be. It just really depends. There also could be these municipal taxes that you might not know about that are separate from property taxes. We always hear a lot about like, well, the school's great. I moved into this area because the schools are so good. If the schools are good, the taxes are high. And the taxes might be additional bills you'll get from the state or city, Department of Revenue. So just a note there.
Yeah, in the greater Philadelphia area, if you move outside of the city, so you have the county tax, you have the school tax, and then you have something called the occupancy tax, the occupational tax, where based on your job, if you pay an additional amount of money just to the county. So if you say you're a doctor, you pay, I don't know, an extra $400 or $500. But if you say that you're a repairman, you pay $150. So it's like it's literally there's a list of occupations, and based on that, whatever you list yourself as, that you pay an additional tax, and then part of property tax.
Yeah, and some local government made that rule like 15 years ago. Yeah. And again, there's like wacky stuff, which is why it's a really good idea to at least talk, like when you go see the house and you're standing at the open house, stand at the door, go across the street to the neighbors, bother people, because like it's so crazy that you're making the biggest purchase you'll ever make in your life, and you've probably only spent what, 20 minutes in the house at the open house. Maybe you went back, like that is nuts. So
you basically never talk to the previous owners. Everything kind of goes to the agent,
absolutely.
which,
Yeah.
you know, while they are super helpful, their incentive is to sell the house.
To sell the house for the most money. Yep. Quick meme break. We've got old SpongeBob here. That was fun. Anyway, great article was published just yesterday, which John sent over to me this morning, our director of planning, that the hidden costs of home ownership. Look at this. They did our webinar for us. They're skyrocketing. Those costs that, you know, we kind of saw as like helpful and were like a good reason to buy a home and not rent, like those costs are going up. We already mentioned health insurance. I'm sorry, not health insurance. We already mentioned homeowners insurance, just even maintenance, like regular old maintenance. Contractors are more expensive. Labor is more expensive. Raw materials are more expensive. So just things are going up. When you're renting, yes, your rent might also be going up to account for the owner of that home's costs. Just do think about that when you're making this decision. Like, is this the right time for me to buy this house? Like, I know rents are getting really expensive, but it's not always a good idea to buy it. That's what we're trying to convince you of right now. There are a lot of costs associated with homeownership that we don't think about, that don't get mentioned. What else? You know, this is a wild statistic. Like Manhattan, New York City, doesn't everyone want to live here? Isn't this like the greatest real estate market in the world? No, actually home values fell a little bit year over year. So that's a little jarring for people who are like, oh, I can always, you know, buy it, live here for a few years and sell it for a profit because it's New York City, or, you know, Silicon Valley. Like, you're in these hot markets. That doesn't necessarily, it's gonna go on forever, that price increase. And I love the comment section of the Wall Street Journal. But I pulled this one, which is, I've been renting for the last 6 years. This article was a nice reminder of why. Love you, Sarah, whoever that was. Be ready to spend on a renovation, even if you don't want to do one. Like we mentioned, things happen. You don't like certain things, even if you think you like the way the house is configured, or you think you like the bathroom, chances are you're going to want to change it. So part of, can I afford this house? Part of that equation is, you know, do I have enough cash for just the down payment and all the closing costs and also the stuff that comes afterwards? So renovations typically, what's that?
No, so when you're in the house for that 20 minutes, you're walking around, you can try to imagine yourself in it. But when you actually start living your life and you start moving around every day within the space, you start to realize that maybe things aren't as convenient as you thought they were when you were looking around at it. You know, when you're trying to reach for dishes or things like that in your kitchen, things just aren't lined up the same way. And maybe you wish you had more counter space than you thought you did. But so absolutely, these costs do add up. And these are the kind of the major remodels too. Kitchen and bathroom, 3,000. That's about right.
That's what it costs. Yeah. And you can probably do it for cheaper. You can probably DIY it. If you DIY it, you probably have to pay someone professionally to fix it later. But be my guest. And the other thing is, you know, renovations typically cost, and this is based on data that we have from our clients, 50 to 100% more than the budget. So I don't care what the budget is. I don't care what your contractor tells you. Like, it's gonna be double, or at least 1.5 times. Like, it just always ends up costing more for whatever reason. So that's why we need this buffer. We need this cushion. When you're buying a house, we can't just throw everything we got at the down payment. We have to have some additional cash coming.
Yeah, and this is stuff that they probably won't find on inspection either. As they start digging in, remodeling the kitchen, they'll find something underneath that the inspector wasn't able to get to. And that's really where a lot of these costs start adding up, because you end up fixing literally everything. And the older your house is, speaking from someone who owns a house from 1925, the older your house is, the more stuff there is to find, because codes change and how things are done in different.
We're gonna throw Ed and Julia a 100th anniversary of their house party next year.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can't wait. So if we were buying a house today, let's like put some numbers. Someone had asked earlier about like closing costs or how much we should actually budget. I've got the actual numbers on the next slide, but just want to talk through them. So let's say we're buying a $1.2 million house. If I were doing this, I would assume the following: how much house can I afford, right? I'm gonna need 1% of my purchase price for the mansion tax if I'm buying in New York City, 2% of the purchase price for other taxes, $20,000 for new furniture. I'm just throwing like numbers out here. Couches today cost $5,000, so that's 20%. That's 25% of your budget right out the gate. If you're renovating, 100 to 300,000 at least. If you're renovating deeply, we're talking much more than that. 10K for miscellaneous move-in costs, painting, flooring, refurbishing, the stuff that just you need. 3,000 for movers, 5,000 in random crap, ongoing costs. Generally, we like to budget about 1% of the purchase price of your home value for maintenance. So we love to have that just ready to go in cash at any time. You know, I didn't necessarily include so basically I've said I've very much underestimated our closing costs here at about 2%. So I'd maybe even increase that a little bit. It just really depends on what area you're buying and what the property taxes are going to be.
I mean, title insurance in some areas is sometimes 2% like of the price. So yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So even this is like a low ball. So we've got, again, here's our lovely mortgage calculator from brooklynfi.com/mortgage. Move-in costs, we've got our down payment, 20%, right? That's kind of the standard. I think you can put less down in some circumstances.
If you're a first-time home buyer, they allow you to put down between 3 and 5%, but that doesn't, you still have to then pay private mortgage insurance. But yes, you can definitely put down less than that. They also have certain occupation loans. I know for physicians that you can actually put down 0% and be able to get into a home without paying anything down. But again, all you're doing there is you're just pushing the cost into the loan. So your interest payment is now much greater than it would have been if you were able to have money down. Plus the private mortgage insurance that has to come into play if you have less than 20% equity in your home. So
yeah, and that's just an extra percentage. So yeah, private mortgage insurance is basically like you're not able to meet the 20% threshold to get you there. They're gonna raise your interest rate. What else? Just other random taxes. If you're fancy, renovating furniture. We don't really talk about the emergency fund enough, I think, with homeownership. When you're renting, like I said, if you can't make rent, you move and they kick you out. Like, okay, that sucks. Let's have a few months buffer just in case something happens. When you own a home, you have to make that mortgage payment. If you don't, you go into what's called foreclosure. Now there are ways to delay that for various hardships, and COVID was one of them, or military deployment, whatever. But if you don't make your mortgage payment, you're likely going to lose your house, and you're going to lose all that equity you put in there. So we typically recommend that you have. I'm conservative. I think you need a year of mortgage payments in cash, ready to go. Now, I understand you just bought the house, you just cleared all your cash accounts, so it's going to take you. You're not going to have that right away. But I think as a goal, just to have that sitting in the bank, making you feel good, knowing that if you lost your job or had an unexpected, the boiler explodes and it's a big, repair. I find that very helpful. And I'm sure our other planners would disagree with me there, but that is what makes me comfy, is having that much.
I mean, when we do financial plans, we build that into the emergency fund calculations. We look at your mortgage payment, and obviously everybody's situation is different, but I agree. When you're buying a substantial home, it's definitely better to have a larger cash buffer, because you never know.
You never know. That's what we should call this webinar. You never know.
Yeah.
Speaking of you never know, we have some updated legislation that has come through. We're still unpacking this. It goes into effect in July. But basically there was a class action lawsuit against the Realtor Association, which basically said, it's not fair. There's not enough competition here in this market. Why are we paying for both the buyer's commission and the seller's commission, which is typically, it's 6% that the seller usually pays, and 3% would go to the buyer's agent and 3% would go to the seller's agent. So basically everyone said, and the suit said, that's not fair. So starting in July, you'll basically be able to negotiate your part of that fee. And basically it won't just be this understood 6%. You'll be able to shop around a little bit, which is interesting to me.
The important part of this one, though, is that now as a buyer, typically you never had to pay for your own real estate agent. Now this is additional cost. Well, now whatever rate you negotiate with, it may not be 3% of the purchase price, but usually the seller was paying for your rate before for your agent, and now you'll have to do it. So now you have to find your own agent and pay them more than usually with a current agent, they would charge like $400, some kind of nominal fee. But now there's going to be an additional cost to buying a home.
Yeah, and just I honestly don't know how it's gonna play out with the buyers, and so we're kind of just like waiting and seeing. I'm sure we'll do a follow-up at some point this
Yeah.
fall, once we've actually seen some transactions go through, probably with some agents, right? See how they're doing and how they're adjusting.
Yeah.
Look, again, this is not anti-real estate agent. I think real estate agents are very valuable during this process. However, I think there are too many. There are a lot of agents out there who are like, oh, this is easy. I watched Selling Sunset. I can do this. You really want to make sure you find an agent who not only like knows the market, but also knows houses and can kind of help you with these things. Like, I don't know how to spot a rotting beam, but maybe your agent can kind of help you with like picking the right house and making sure you don't make a mistake and get something that is going to be a money pit, which is what we're trying to avoid. What else? Oh, we had some questions from folks who registered. What are the pros and cons of making an all cash offer versus taking out a mortgage? I would say pro, your offer is likely to get accepted if the seller wants to move quickly. I would say that's the only pro. Can you think of any other pros?
I mean, that's basically the pro, right? I mean, the interest rates are quite high. So if you're taking out a mortgage and you want to avoid the interest payment, but that means you're still now taking all of your liquidity, taking out flexibility out of your plan and putting it all into an illiquid asset. So we typically, from a financial planning standpoint, unless the situation is so frothy, we like to say that it works, we typically don't recommend all cash offers just because most plans are they're not able to take on that type of liquidity crunch essentially. So
And also, a mortgage, most mortgages are 30 years and interest rates do not stay the same for 30 years. So even if you don't like interest rates today and
yeah,
you're offered, 8 or 9% or whatever, chances are you could probably refinance. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but like you're likely not going to be paying that same interest rate through that entire length of your loan. So just keep that in mind, like rates are going to fall. Remember when the Fed slashed rates, everyone went to refinance, which is great because a lot of those people bought houses, pre-2008 at 7 and 8%, which is where we are today.
Yep.
What was the most stressful part of the homeowner process for you? What about you, Ed?
This is a tough one. I mean, obviously honestly, there's a lot of uncertainty. You walk into the house and you walk around for 20 minutes and you fall in love with it because you imagine yourself in the house as it is. And then you start going through the inspection process, and then you start going through all the nitty-gritty part of the contract, and then you're finding all these issues that you didn't think about. And then it becomes less romantic and more realistic. And so that's when it becomes truly scary and stressful when you actually now have to move the money into a deposit and then finish that down payment. And then the closing costs come in and they give you the estimate. And like you have to part with this cash that you work so hard for to save. And then you just have this house. And then you just have a house. And then it's like, well, what's the next step?
Yeah.
I mean, the stressful part is definitely that time between your offer acceptance, which is not acceptance, to closing. Because you don't really know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
You're just kind of sitting there, you're homeless, but with an offer, your rent lease, depending on how well you've timed it, is either you're on a month to month or you're double paying because some of the mortgages started. So that's really that waiting part. And then there's a lot of FOMO in that moment. We're like, what have I just done? That's I think the stressful part.
Agree completely. I will also add that another stressful part is like 2 months in when you've depleted all your cash to buy the thing. You're adjusting to this new payment. You keep getting bills in the mail. Like there is this like moment where you're like, oh God, did I make a mistake? Like I really miss my one rent payment and my internet bill. Like it like just keep it. So adjusting your income and adjusting your household kind of cash flow to this new big expense is really fun.
Yeah.
When will prices drop? If I knew that, I wouldn't be sitting here doing this dang webinar, folks. I don't know when prices are supposed to drop. Economics tells us that as interest rates rise, prices should drop. That's not necessarily happening. As we just saw in New York City, in one market, we're seeing prices drop a little bit. I don't have a good answer for this. The price, buy the house you want. The interest rates are high, the price is high, probably a good house. There's demand for it. If you can afford it, it's the right price, What range of purchase price should one consider for different savings income amounts? That's like a whole other webinar. I'm trying to think if we have any materials on our website about that. Just a good rule of thumb, and also what the banks are going to look at is that it's called your debt to income ratio, so that your payment, your total payment, your mortgage, any HOA, your home insurance, all that stuff, that has to be less than 36% is
Yeah.
the debt to income ratio. I like less than 30%. So it has to be 36% less than of your monthly income for the bank to approve you. So that's like a good thing to think about. And then also that the down payment should not completely wipe out all of your assets. If you have to go to your 401k to buy a home, probably not a good investment, probably something that you can't afford. So
Yeah, I think that last question is really, it's so situational based.
Yeah.
Even this rule of thumb of 36% literally probably won't apply to anyone. It's like the average American, which no one is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for the questions. Does anyone have any other questions? We will happily answer anything that you throw our way. Oh my God, who put this in here? Big news. Big news, the liquidity event is coming back. That is our podcast that we do here at BKFi. I co-host it with my co-founder, Shane. We talk about the news, we talk about the financial markets, we answer questions like, how much house can I afford, live on the air. We try to entertain each other. We're coming back May 10th. So if you didn't listen before, I think you're gonna find it. If you like this webinar, it's just more of the shit. Just us riffing on finance. Ed will obviously have you on as a co-host in the first.
Absolutely. I was a huge fan of the original podcast. I think as soon as I started BKFi, I actually really liked that it became part of my rotation. I thought it was pretty cool. I've been wanting it back ever since.
Amazing. Since we don't have any more questions, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap things up here. Thank you so much, folks, for attending. Thank you, Ed, for co-hosting with me. As always, you can find us on brooklynfi.com. And please drop us a line. We're on, Instagram, whatever. You guys are clients. I see all of you. Let us know what you want to hear in the future. We'll talk about anything. Thank you so much. See you soon.